Hey guys, what's up? It's Alex or Nuznus here, and today we're going to be looking at the newest pocket slot item released with the node on front with Elder God Wars, which is going to be the Scripture of Jas. Now, this book has a +8 to all style bonuses and currently is dropped from the new boss, Karapek. And it costs around 50 to 60 million GP to buy the book as of prices today, and the pages are very cheap, costing at around 150k each, and it basically costs you 200k per hour to use this book, and it's mostly because the pages are so common from the boss. The special effect of this book is the Time Rift special effect, and when activated for 10 seconds, all damage from your abilities whilst the Time Rift is active gets stored. Once the Time Rift closes after 10 seconds, 20% of your damage is applied to the enemy. This book really sparked my interest when it came out, and I wanted to do some testing on it since it was so cheap to use. Could this book be better than Scrimshaw's or even comparable? If it is, it's an amazing item as the pages are so cheap and it's only around a 50 million GP startup cost. So that's what we're going to do in today's video. We're going to see if this book is better than Scrimshaw's or comparable to Scrimshaw's and do a bunch of testings. But first, here's a look at the special Time Rift ability being used on a dummy. As you can see, when the ability activates, you'll get a yellow symbol appearing on your buff bar. Then the ability counts down from 10 seconds. Now during this time, all the damage that you deal gets stored. When the 10 seconds is up, it activates and the Time Rift deals 20% of what you dealt in those 10 seconds. So for instance, if you deal 100k damage in the 10 seconds, you'll supposedly deal 20k damage, although I'm pretty positive that this caps out. So more likely, I believe you're going to hit 10k damage if you deal 50k in those 10 seconds. So like the Scrimshaw, it's based off your damage dealt, and it's not a passive effect that goes off on its own like the Illuminated God books. One thing that my friend mentioned that I thought was interesting that I wish this book had is if you could choose when you deal the damage, kind of like during the Time Rift during Karapek, you can choose to close it whenever you want. That would be really cool for things like dealing damage on, Solok, DPS checks. You could like store dealt damage in there during the fight and then use it afterwards, but I'm sure that would bring up a lot of problems, and that's why the book is the way it is. So I was using this scripture at Karapek a lot, and I decided that I would test it in a few places for this video. So the first thing I did was go to DPS dummies and test it versus the Book of Law using a challenge gem. Now keep in mind, the Book of Law only works well on targets that aren't moving, so it does have a slight advantage at the dummies compared to a boss that moves around a lot. Now I used the same buffs the whole time, and I used normal hit mode on the challenge gems. So after 5 minutes, I ended up with 1.12 million DPS for the scripture and then 1.135 million DPS for the Illuminated Book of Law. In other words, it was really close. It was a 15k damage difference between 5 minutes, which is not very much. But a challenge gem might not be the best way for testing this, so I decided to test and compare at different bosses. So the first boss I decided to test this at was something that's kind of like a DPS dummy, but a little bit different, which is the Magister. So basically, I put the scripture up against the Scrimshaw of Cruelty for range, and I did some kills with no pocket slot item as well, just so I could have a solid comparison. So after doing some Magister kills, here is what I got in terms of data. Now keep in mind, I used everything the same. I used Death Swiftness for every kill. I would wait till I got it back so I could use it for every single kill, and I used the exact same rotation as close as I could get it. Obviously there's some human error, but with no pocket slot item, we ended up getting 43.8 second average kill times at the Magister. Now if we move on to the Scrimshaw of Cruelty, which is what I use, that goes down to a 39.2 second average kill speed. And then finally the Scripture, I got a 39 second kill speed on average. So the difference between the Scripture and the Scrimshaw of Cruelty was extremely close. And you can also clearly see that the Scripture is improving our kill speed by about 4 to 5 seconds from if I wasn't using a pocket slot item, so it's clearly helping our damage. The same with the Scrimshaw. This was way closer than I thought, and I wanted to do a little more testing, and I decided to go to Carapace with normal mode and try these out as well. Alright, so basically I did normal mode and I did it with the Scrimshaw of Cruelty and then also with the Scripture. Now when it came to the Scripture, my average kill time for normal mode was 2 minutes and 4 seconds. And then I did the same thing with the Scrimshaw of Cruelty and my average kill time was 2 minutes and 2 seconds. So for a 2 minute or so boss fight, it was basically a 2-second difference. The same as the Magister, really close. Now the Scrimshaw barely beat it out here, and I'm not sure if I would say that the Scripture is better. But we're going to go into my final thoughts now. So before we get into my conclusion on the Scripture of Jas, I'm going to go into the cost per hour versus the other pocket slot items real quick. So the Illuminated Book of Law costs around 2.5 to 3.5 million GP per hour to use, and using any normal Scrimshaw like the Scrimshaw of Cruelty, the Scrimshaw of the Elements is going to cost you around 2 mil to 2.2 million GP per hour. Now, the Scripture of Jas is a mere 195 KGP per hour as of current prices. Now, it is because a lot of people are doing the boss, but also the pages are just super common. And the startup cost to buy one of these is around 60 million GP. So, what's the conclusion? Is the Scripture of Jas really a Scrimshaw killer? Well, for me it is, and I cannot say that the Scripture of Jas is better than normal Scrimshaws, but it's really, and I mean really close to being just as good. Super close actually, as you saw by our findings. And I'm a person that uses a Scrimshaw or an Illuminated Book of Law almost everywhere. I use it at Elite Dungeons, Raksha, even God Wars 2. It's just my go-to pocket slot item, and I know I spend a lot of GP on it, but I just want that extra DPS where a lot of people say, don't use a pocket slot at God Wars 2, it's not worth the money, and I realize that, but I personally just like the extra damage. Well, I think it's safe to say that the Scripture of Jas is 90 to 95% as good as a normal Scrimshaw or a Book of Law, and it's a fraction of the price. While you do need to pay a little for the startup cost to own the item at 60 million GP, it'll honestly pay for itself in around 20 hours of use, which isn't that much time. There's still testing that needs to be done, and I'm sure a lot of high-level PVMers are going to test this at a bunch of places. So I want to test this at more places to see where this shines the most, but from the testing in this video, I can confidently say that I will probably never buy a normal Scrimshaw again as long as this book stays so cheap. So what do you guys think about these findings? I find it awesome that Jagex put some cheaper pocket slot options that are powerful enough to use in PVM because the price per hour was getting really high for these items as of late. As always, thanks for watching, guys. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more Elder God Wars content. And before you comment it, no, I'm not merching these books. I actually hope they go down in price so everyone can get an accessible pocket slot item for PVM. And judging by the pages on the GE, you can see there's actually an Easter egg. You can see there are more scriptures coming with the future Elder God Wars fronts. So it's going to be a very interesting few months, to say the least.